Hi, I'm Kevin Price with your Price Point Edition. Want to remind you to check us out over there at priceofbusiness.com, where I do the Price of Business show on Business Talk 1110 a.m. KTEK in Houston, Texas. Also, I'm publisher and editor-in-chief of USDailyReview.com. So we got scandal, and then we have scandal, and don't forget we have other scandal that's plaguing the Obama administration, really making Richard Nixon look like a lightweight when it comes to scandals, a man who was almost impeached. Probably would have been impeached just because of the demographics, party affiliations of the House and Senate when he was president of the United States. The situation would have never even gotten to that point if there had been a majority of Republicans in either in that House or even a strong enough minority in the Senate to prevent it. But the scandals of this administration that the Obama administration are involved in are epic. They are almost biblical in terms of proportion. You've got scandals when it comes to the IRS being used as a muscle against conservative organizations. You've got a scandal called Fast and Furious that's largely been swept aside because of all the news scandals we just learned about. But Fast and Furious was the smuggling of guns by a U.S. government agency to Mexican drug cartels. I know it sounds like fiction. That actually ended up the guns being used to kill hundreds of Mexicans and at least one or two U.S. officials. What else am I missing? Of course, the Benghazi scandal, that situation in which the administration lied blatantly over and over again over the fact of what took place in Benghazi, creating a whole narrative in order to protect, it appears, their Secretary of State at the time, Hillary Clinton. Then, of course, we've got the AP scandal with the Associated Press, where there's actually been a monitoring of taking place of phone calls, maybe of the calls themselves. They're saying just a log, but what good is a log without knowing the content? And now you've got another scandal in which there's an investigation being done against a Fox News journalist that could eventually lead to that journalist facing decades in prison if the Obama administration has its way. This is what's taking place. And even as I remind you of all these scandals and the fact that this is the most toxic, the most scandal-ridden administration in modern history, with all of that list, I'm also mindful of the fact that the United States has bigger problems now than it probably has had in its entire history. Of course, with Japan about 15 years ago, a little longer than that, Japan essentially economically fell off the face of the earth from a mega superpower to what has now been called the silent decade. And the decade has gone on decades. Well, what happened back then? What corresponded with that? Well, guess what? The national debt of Japan at that time equaled their gross domestic product. And we know from history that when countries' debt equals their GDP comes down to a screeching halt. It simply doesn't produce like it used to produce. And now Japan is involved in a very bold experiment of trying mass inflation as a way to jumpstart the economy. Unfortunately, there's no historical evidence of that ever working. I'll remind you of places like Zimbabwe, where 80% of the population is unemployed, but virtually everyone is a millionaire because of the cheap money they constantly produce. I'll remind you of the Weimar Republic in Germany, where money became so worthless they were literally sweeping it into the gutters. And it was cheaper. It was cheaper, in fact, to wallpaper your house with money than it was to buy wallpaper. That's what happens when you try to print your way out of the debt. Well, that's exactly what the Obama administration is doing right now. Massive, massive increases in the monetary supply with the objective of not only paying off the debt and to try to prevent the inevitable when it comes to that arena, but also to stimulate the economy. And the results are the most stagnant, long-term stagnation we have seen since the Great Depression. In my opinion, it's not working. We need to restore sound economic policies, tax policies that encourage growth and wealth creation and not stifle it, monetary policies that make sense and have a stable economy as the underpinning and not economic growth, because economic growth with monetary policy never works, and a return to sound economic thinking. That's my opinion. I'd love to get yours. Email me at info@usdailyreview.com.